I've done quite a lot of traveling, and I think that has influenced, I guess, that sounds a bit cheesy, but love of the built environment, really. And it sounds cheesy, but I'm also always surprised by what I think sometimes people work in the property sector. I'm like, do you love the built environment? Because no, I'm not convinced. And I think so experiencing different places and cultures has definitely influenced, you know, how do I want to go somewhere and be excited by it at small or large scale. And I've also lived in both the States and Canada, and I think that has also influenced, because it's very different ways of living, really. And then mentor wise, I've benefited from people who've kind of guided me without micromanaging me, which has, you know, absolutely benefited me. And I don't respond well to being micromanaged, so it's, you know, letting me have the freedom to sort of flourish at a relatively junior level in my career, and to make mistakes and fix them has ultimately benefited me. So John Stoddard, who heads up planning at CBRE, massive influence, and also operates in a very different way to how I operate. So I've gained from that. He's I'd say he's way more sociable than I am, and that is interesting seeing how that dynamic works. And I'd say the same for I worked on Clapham Park with a guy called Mark Connell. He used to be at JLL, now is at Scope 25, a sociable planner as well. And again, I find it really interesting to see how does that work through. And I don't mean I'm unsociable, but not at all. You know, I kind of like, oh, here's the work, and that will speak for itself at the same time. And it's that sort of balance. And then, you know, I very much come from the Jeff Field School of Planning in some respect, who was my boss at JLL, and the kind of almost lawyer type approach, I think, sometimes to planning, and that has definitely benefited me and shaped how I kind of operate, really. And this is what I've taken from it. So my view is there is always a way with planning. It's it sounds a bit flippant, but it's how much time and money do you want to chuck at it, really. And it's the manipulation, if you like, I mean that more positively, of the words in order to get what you want in terms of the output on the ground, which I think is a lawyerly-ish kind of approach, if that makes sense. There's obviously different ways that people approach planning, and then I think there is a tendency amongst a certain strand of planners to be like, well, these are the words on the page, and that's the Bible approach, and oh my goodness, this development, which, I mean, maybe it looks amazing and it will deliver 25 million affordable homes, but it doesn't match the words on the page, so we can't let that happen. There's that kind of planning, and then there's almost the sort of networking, knowing people. My view is you need a combination of the two, really. So you need to obviously, you know, have a good attitude and make things happen whilst having an awareness of framework and policy, and it's how do you work the two in order to get the overall output.
Yeah, it's no good just responding to what people want, because there are a set of principles at play, but it's no good just focusing on the principles, because there are real people involved.
Absolutely, it's a balance, and it's got to be a negotiation between the two, otherwise it's just a bit robotic otherwise.
Oh, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. Tell me just a tiny bit about living in the States, living in, I think you said Canada as well. How long were you there for, and in what way does that change the way you think about places?
I did a master's at Syracuse University, which is upstate New York, and I mean, I went there, I'd say pretty green. I'd done my undergrad in London, and then I spent a year traveling all over the place. And the reason I went there is I didn't want to live in the UK, and it was a good way of being able to live abroad. And it's I remember walking on the campus and I was like, oh my God, it's like being in the films. And it was amazing. So I did geography, and geography was in a building and it was deliberately done. It's the Maxwell building. The the idea was that you mixed with all the other disciplines, because then you'd bounce off each other and you wouldn't just be in geography. And benefited from that in terms of, you've got the economist who pretends that important things don't matter in order to get to the end game, and you've got the historian who perhaps looks a bit too far at the past, and sociology and political science, and it all kind of mixes up and mashes together. And I think that experience, plus, I work hard now, but I have never worked so hard in my life as I worked at Syracuse. Like, you could never do enough in academia. There's always more, and there's always people who are doing more and more, and you just sort of think, I haven't slept for 2 days, so I don't know how you're generating more work, but anyway. And I think that experience of drawing on different aspects as to how we experience places and so on has definitely influenced me. And then living in the States is a different, to me, surprisingly different, given that there are so many similarities between our cultures, but much more reliance on the car, in some ways bolder, and how that sort of plays out into living, I found kind of interesting. And the reason I lived in Canada is, so a master's takes 2 years there, so I lived to do my research. I went to Toronto for 3 or 4 months and lived there. Toronto, so Syracuse is very much a college town. Toronto, sprawly, never-endingly sprawly. So different experiences of cities. And then I started but quit a PhD over in Vancouver, so different experience there as well. I do a lot of sport, and the sport side of things was amazing. I've never lived or experienced anywhere where I found it so difficult to mix people from different areas of your life. And I wasn't the only one who said that about Vancouver. But yeah, very difficult to mix people from different, like, it'd be like, here are your yoga friends, here's your university friends, here's your friends from this thing, let's mix them together. Oh no, we don't do that. And that's quite strange. Yeah.